Okay, everybody, welcome. My name is Olivia Della O, and I am the post-secondary program coordinator with the Fulfillment Fund. I primarily work with our college students, and in particular, our community college students. So today, we will be talking about is imposter syndrome, what that is, what that entails, what that actually means, and why we're talking about it. And then towards the end of the presentation, after we kind of go through the basics, we will talk about how to combat imposter syndrome if you do find yourself experiencing this. Okay, so because we will be talking about imposter syndrome, and we'll get into the details in a little bit, but it is a psychological phenomenon. It does have to deal with mental health. So I think it's really important that we do take a moment to talk about how everyone is doing today. Even if you're not able to have a full conversation, it's really important to check in with yourself, check in with other people before you go into a new situation to kind of get your mindset just in the right frame of mind before you do go into this new situation. So, again, because we are talking about imposter syndrome, I think it's really important that we do take a moment and let everybody gather how they're feeling, kind of reset themselves if they're having a need to do that. So, we'll go ahead and take a couple seconds. Okay, so again, even if you're not able to have a full conversation about how you're doing, how everybody else in the group is doing, it's just important to check in with yourself, assess how you're feeling, so that way when you do go into this new situation, you're fully aware of how you're showing up and how that may impact the situation at hand. So thank you everybody for taking this couple moments, and hopefully everybody's ready to get into the content of our presentation. Okay, so what exactly is imposter syndrome? I know the syndrome part of it sounds pretty negative, but we'll go over what exactly this means. So, the actual definition is an individual experience of self perceived intellectual phoniness, fraud, a pattern in which one doubts one's accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. Despite external evidence of their competence, those experiencing this phenomenon remain convinced that they are frauds and do not deserve all they have achieved. So that was a lot of words. So we'll break that down a little bit about what exactly is imposter syndrome. So some of the key words in here are an individual experience, right? So you are experiencing it as an individual, or someone as an individual is experiencing it by themselves, and fraud, right? So to break it down, people who experience imposter syndrome feel like they don't deserve accomplishments that they have achieved despite any sort of evidence. So in the end here we see it says despite external evidence. So for example, if we're talking about college in this specific situation, if some students are experiencing imposter syndrome around college acceptances or starting college, it may sound like I'm not good enough to go to this college. It was a mistake that I've gotten into this college. This spot was meant for somebody else, right? Despite the fact that you received the acceptance email, it has your name on it, you went to the orientation, you have the student ID, there's something about it that just doesn't stick, right? A couple other words to stand out when we're talking about imposter syndrome are pattern, right? So it needs to be a pattern. Everybody deals with self-doubt sometimes, or stress, or particularly stressful new situations, but the key word here is a pattern of these feelings, right? So it's totally normal to have regular stressors, totally normal to feel like maybe you don't deserve some of the accomplishments, right? There's a lot of different things that contribute to that, but imposter syndrome does come down to a pattern of this feeling. Okay, so who can experience imposter syndrome? Just from these couple groups that I have up here on the slide, you can see it's a pretty broad range of people. So to begin with, women can experience imposter syndrome. The original study, which we're going to go into a little bit more, was originally centered on women, right? So high achieving women in the workplace and in a college setting, despite all of their achievements, felt inadequate, felt this imposter syndrome. In the original study as well, men were slightly mentioned in experiencing imposter syndrome, but to a lesser degree. But there was a later study that showed that men do indeed also experience imposter syndrome. Another group of people who can experience imposter syndrome are first generation college students. So there's been a lot of research around first generation college student experiences in general, and imposter syndrome was found to have popped up in this group of people as well. And then another example of people who can experience imposter syndrome are professors, right? So keeping it within the context of college, I know a lot of the times we think of students having trouble with adjusting or having a stressful time if they're new to college, but professors can also feel this way, right? Professors are humans just like everybody else, even though sometimes it can be hard as a college student to talk to them. It can be a little intimidating, but they can also experience imposter syndrome. So keep that in mind as we go through this presentation, and after, as well as you start going into college, that no matter who you come in contact with, they could be experiencing this. You could be experiencing this. So as you go through college, just keep that in mind. Okay, so why exactly are we talking about imposter syndrome? Right? What's the point? Is it to scare you? Is it to tell you that this thing is going to happen to you? No, right? I just want to make sure that we're giving you a lot of important information about the possible things that you could come in contact with or that you could experience, right? The more knowledge, the better. So the first point that I want to touch on is, as we can see in the last slide, it's a really common phenomenon, and almost anyone can experience this in any new situation, right? So as we talked about before, there's all kinds of new situations you could be put into, different stressors, different things going on in your life that could contribute to experiencing imposter syndrome. So again, very normal. It's a very common thing for a lot of different people to experience. So this is one of the reasons why we want to bring this up. The next point, we want to just prepare you for this next big step and change in your life, right? Again, the more information that we give you about what's to come or potentially what could come in this new experience of college, the better, right? So that way you're more prepared. You can kind of think about everything that you have in your toolkit already to help you with this. And then the last point on this slide, again, just to normalize that it's okay to talk about how you're really doing, and it's okay to ask for support and guidance, not just with imposter syndrome, but with any challenge that you may come across, whether it's college or anything else. So it's really just to, again, bring this conversation up to know that if you do have questions or concerns or need help with anything, that it's totally okay to ask for help, whether it's from us or anybody on your campus or your family or your friends. Okay, so what are some of the symptoms, I guess you want to say, of those who are people who are experiencing imposter syndrome? What can they experience? One of the things people can experience if they're going through imposter syndrome is a constant feeling of inadequacy. So, as you remember from the initial definition from the beginning of the presentation, it's feeling like you're not good enough, right? So, those thoughts of, I'm not smart enough, I shouldn't be here, or I shouldn't have gotten this job, I don't know enough. So, those feelings of inadequacy. And again, constant, right? So, we want to notice those words in there too. It's not just sometimes, but it's constant. The second point, having an unhealthy pressure to succeed, right? So almost obsessive, right? So the key word here is unhealthy. You have to be the best all the time. You have to get that A. You have to get every job that you interview for, right? It's one thing to be competitive, and it's one thing to have high expectations or high goals for yourself, but it's another thing when it's an unhealthy and it's starting to impact the other areas of your life. So that's kind of how you can measure the unhealthy or healthiness of something, if it's starting to impact a lot of different areas in your life in a significant way, right? So if you're obsessing over having to be perfect or having to succeed and it's impacting your eating habits or sleeping schedule or ability to concentrate, those are some of the things to keep in mind. Okay, and then the last bullet point, people who experience imposter syndrome could also withdraw from evaluative situations. So what that means is, evaluation, anything that you're going to be graded on or scored, right? Like a test, an exam, maybe you have a review at work, anything where somebody else is going to have to kind of assess your performance. So for college students, this could look like not wanting to go to midterms or take a test, not wanting to go to office hours because you're not doing well in the class. So really, instead of facing what's ahead, it's withdrawing from those situations, so you don't have to come to terms with maybe there is an issue, maybe there is a struggle, but doing that, withdrawing from the situation, you don't know what the answer is going to be. But again, thinking of these as a pattern, as a constant feeling. Again, we all struggle with this from time to time, but if it's impacting every area of your life or more areas of your life, that's when it's time to talk to somebody about it or bring it up to get some support. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and watch this video. It's a really quick recap of everything we've been talking about so far, and then it's going to lead us into the next parts of our conversation as well. So I'll go ahead and start that and let you all watch it.
Even after writing 11 books and winning several prestigious awards, Maya Angelou couldn't escape the nagging doubt that she hadn't really earned her accomplishments. Albert Einstein experienced something similar. He described himself as an involuntary swindler whose work didn't deserve as much attention as it had received. Accomplishments at the level of Angelou's or Einstein's are rare, but their feeling of fraudulence is extremely common. Why can't so many of us shake feelings that we haven't earned our accomplishments, or that our ideas and skills aren't worthy of others' attention? Psychologist Pauline Rose Clance was the first to study this unwarranted sense of insecurity. In her work as a therapist, she noticed many of her undergraduate patients shared a concern. Though they had high grades, they didn't believe they deserved their spots at the university. Some even believed their acceptance had been an admissions error. While Clance knew these fears were unfounded, she could also remember feeling the exact same way in graduate school. She and her patients experienced something that goes by a number of names: imposter phenomenon, imposter experience, and imposter syndrome. Together with colleague Suzanne Imes, Clance first studied imposterism in female college students and faculty. Their work established pervasive feelings of fraudulence in this group. Since that first study, the same thing has been established across gender, race, age, and a huge range of occupations, though it may be more prevalent and disproportionately affect the experiences of underrepresented or disadvantaged groups. To call it a syndrome is to downplay how universal it is. It's not a disease or an abnormality, and it isn't necessarily tied to depression, anxiety, or self-esteem. Where do these feelings of fraudulence come from? People who are highly skilled or accomplished tend to think others are just as skilled. This can spiral into feelings that they don't deserve accolades and opportunities over other people. And as Angelou and Einstein experienced, there's often no threshold of accomplishment that puts these feelings to rest. Feelings of imposterism aren't restricted to highly skilled individuals either. Everyone is susceptible to a phenomenon known as pluralistic ignorance, where we each doubt ourselves privately, but believe we're alone in thinking that way because no one else voices their doubts. Since it's tough to really know how hard our peers work, how difficult they find certain tasks, or how much they doubt themselves, there's no easy way to dismiss feelings that we're less capable than the people around us. Intense feelings of imposterism can prevent people from sharing their great ideas or applying for jobs and programs where they'd excel. At least so far, the most surefire way to combat imposter syndrome is to talk about it. Many people suffering from imposter syndrome are afraid that if they ask about their performance, their fears will be confirmed. And even when they receive positive feedback, it often fails to ease feelings of fraudulence. But on the other hand, hearing that an advisor or mentor has experienced feelings of imposterism can help relieve those feelings. The same goes for peers. Even simply finding out there's a term for these feelings can be an incredible relief. Once you're aware of the phenomenon, you can combat your own imposter syndrome by collecting and revisiting positive feedback. One scientist who kept blaming herself for problems in her lab started to document the causes every time something went wrong. Eventually, she realized most of the problems came from equipment failure and came to recognize her own competence. We may never be able to banish these feelings entirely, but we can have open conversations about academic or professional challenges. With increasing awareness of how common these experiences are, perhaps we can feel freer to be frank about our feelings and build confidence in some simple truths. You have talent, you are capable, and you belong.
Okay, so as we saw in the video, it did give us a recap of things that we've already talked about in terms of what imposter syndrome is, who can experience it, and what you can experience if you do find yourself dealing with imposter syndrome. And it did give us a nice foundation of where this started and how it started. And then towards the end, we saw that it did give us some tips for how to combat imposter syndrome. So that's where we're going to start next. Okay, so what are some more ways that you can combat imposter syndrome if you do find yourself dealing with this or feeling these feelings? So creating connections on campus. So because now a lot of learning is going to be virtual, it may be a little bit more difficult to find those connections on campus. But there are definitely ways you can feel connected to your new campus, whether that's plugging in to student groups, getting in contact with faculty or staff. There are going to be different ways to create those connections on campus and create that support system. So like I mentioned, a great way to start is, just connecting with professors and staff, right? They may be feeling a similar way to you and you don't know. So it's always good to reach out to them, create those connections, because they can serve as another way to support you in this new time of college. As I just mentioned as well, exploring student organizations on campus to help with your support system. So whether it's something academic related, sports related, finding a group of your peers that can contribute to that support system on campus and creating that space where you're comfortable and you feel safe. A good place to start can be culture or identity-based orgs. But again, there's so many student groups on campus that if you want something that's based on your culture or identity, there's plenty of groups for that. If you want something based on major or hobby or special interest, there's so many places that you can plug into on campus and really create that community for yourself. And it's really important to remember as well that even though college is a new experience, you are coming in with a lot of skills that you've already kind of honed in and practiced in your life in high school and in your day-to-day life that can help you navigate this new environment. So for example, say you need to commute to school eventually, but you've already been doing that your whole life, riding the buses, you know how to get around. So that's going to be a strength of yours that you're bringing into college. Maybe you I've had to help parents translate documents and go into really important meetings, whether it's doctor's offices or anything like that. So you kind of already have a notion for what it could feel like going into a financial aid office or an academic advisor's office. So don't sell yourself short. You do have a lot of skills already that are going to be important for you in college and that can help you feel like you can overcome these imposter syndrome feelings. And then lastly on this slide, creating clear steps for yourself to follow when you do doubt yourself, right? So whether this happens often or it's, once in a while, just have some clear steps. So when you do feel like this, you know how to help start making yourself feel better. So maybe that's going on a walk. Maybe you like to meditate. Maybe that's texting your friend or calling a family member, whatever it is to help you through those feelings of doubt and to help you kind of get through that funk. Okay. And remember, don't be afraid to ask for help. So if you need more support than what your friends and family can provide, what an academic advisor can provide, or what we at the Fulfillment Fund can provide, remember that your campus, no matter where you're at, does offer student wellness services that include mental health services and counseling. So I provided a couple of examples from some of our more popular campuses in the program. So we have LACC, we see it's called the Campus Wellness Center. Cal State LA, it's called Counseling and Psychological Services. UCLA, it's also called Counseling and Psychological Services. And for USC, it's called Counseling and Mental Health. So regardless of what it's called, your campus will have these resources available, whether it's in person or virtual. Many places or many schools now, it's not just a phone call to make an appointment, but they do have an online system where you can go in and make your appointment that way. So again, just please, if you do feel like you need extra support, just know that there are plenty of support services on your campus and you just need to reach out and ask. Okay, so thank you everybody for learning a little bit about imposter syndrome. I've attached the sources from the presentation at the end. So have a great rest of your day, everybody, and thank you so much.